Good morning, everyone. Welcome to all the attendees to this seminar on future challenges and resilience in farming system in Europe. Thank you very much for attending this seminar, and thank you very much for moving to this room in which we are going to talk about challenges in farming system in Europe. We are now 46 people attending this meeting, this session, so thank you very much for your interest and participation in this seminar. Okay, let's start. I'm encouraging you to write down your questions on the chat you have on the left side, on the right side of the screen. So please type your questions and will be answers at the end of the session of each presentation. I will read aloud and the presenter will answer them. So don't hesitate to write down your questions on the chat, and I will post the questions at the end of the presentations. So let's start our session today with a presentation of Haluk Hedilkolglu. He's going to talk about the potential influence of COVID on produce, farmers' access to markets and welfare, the case of apple farmers in Turkey. So Haluk, welcome.
Hello, welcome.
Hello. Thank you very much for presenting today. And now it's your turn. I'll give you the floor. Thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you. So let me share my screen here. So can you all see it?
Yes.
Yes. All right, that's good. All right, so today I'm going to talk to you about the potential influence of COVID-19 on produce farmers, access to markets and welfare through the case of apple farmers in Turkey. So let me briefly discuss you the situation. So Turkey is a major apple producing country with 4.3 million tons of production in 2020, which makes Turkey the fourth largest apple producer country in the world as of 2020. So Turkey is a major apple producing country. However, historically, only 5% of the apple produced in Turkey has been exported. So majority of the apple produced in Turkey is domestically consumed. So although Turkey has a major domestic supply of apple for the country, consumers frequently complain from high prices and complain from not being able to reach apple in the market due to high prices. On the other hand, we always see apple growers complain from low producer prices, and we start to see them resuming their apple trees in the region and grow cash crops such as sunflower and corn. So when we look at the consumer prices of apple and how it changes throughout the year, I mean, it's natural that we can see increases, especially during the during the start of the summer when there is less apple available in the market. So there's always an increase, and then there is a decrease when the new harvest season starts. And we can see in this graph there's an increase over time. But when we look at the 2020, and especially after March 2020, when the first COVID-19 case has been detected in Turkey, we see a drastic increase in the prices in comparison to the previous years. So although Turkey is a major apple growing country, we can see that consumer prices have increased drastically in Turkey. So based on our estimates, so one thing we have difficulty in Turkey is reaching reliable data on consumer prices. So sometimes government agencies use the wholesaler prices, so which is not a true representation, because consumer prices should be measured from the retailers or from the farmers market, where they directly reach the apple. But based on our estimates, on average, consumer prices can be as high as 5 times than the producer prices in Turkey. Hence, significant amount of income generated by apple production is received by the intermediaries and not by apple growers. This situation signifies the importance of farmers' access to markets and increased farmers' share of the price paid by the consumers. In general, apple growers rely heavily on skilled, hired labor for harvest and access to market. So the objective of our study is to analyze the potential influence of COVID-19 on produce farmers, access to markets, and economic well-being through using the apple growers. The data for our study consists of two separate surveys conducted in 2 different years in Karaman region of Turkey. So why we chose the Karaman region? Because Karaman is the second largest apple growing region in Turkey with approximately 600,000 tons of apple produced in 2020. So this makes approximately 15% of the apple produced in Turkey as of 2020. So the first survey was conducted through a face-to-face survey in 2020 with 39 apple growers, and the second survey was conducted through telephone with 250 growers in 2021. So we are facing difficulty a little bit with collecting data because of the restrictions, and Turkey has recently gone through a full shutdown of 2 weeks over the last 2 weeks. So the data has just been completed, so my results today will be preliminary, so take that into account. So the marketing options, so I mean, in general, farmers could use different marketing options, but the farmers that we interviewed indicated 4 different options. So the first option is selling all the apple in the orchard to an intermediary without harvesting it. So this option gives the right to harvest and market the apple to an intermediary. Hence, in this option, the farmers does not have to deal with harvesting of the apple, which is labor intensive. So if the farmer cannot find labor, hired labor to harvest the apple, they just give the right to harvest and sell the apple to an intermediary. So they just receive the money based on the price that they think suitable for the whole orchard. So this is the first option. The second option is harvesting the apple and selling it at the farm gate to an intermediary. So in this option, the farmer harvests the apple and sell it right away at the farm gate without storing it. The third option is harvesting apple and taking to a cold storage unit and then selling it over time. So in that case, the farmer does not need to rush selling the apple after harvesting it, and they can just sell it throughout the year. And the fourth option is harvesting apple and selling at the farmer's market. So this eliminates the intermediary and the farmer can receive the price paid by the consumer. So in general, the situation is like that. When the apples reach the harvesting season, you need to harvest it in 2 weeks. So if you don't harvest it in 2 weeks, they're just going to drop, and then in that case, you would just sell them to a apple juice factory. So apple juice factories receive the apples with the lowest quality or the apples that dropped from the tree that are not harvested. So in that case, farmers would not cover their cost of production. So therefore, the farmers are in rush, either harvesting the apple and storing it or selling the apple when they reach the harvest season. And most of the time, farmers in the region need that labor to harvest at the same time. So that makes labor very restricted in that region during the harvest season. So when we look at the distribution of marketing options for 2016, we see that around 50% of the farmers chose the first option, which involves not harvesting the apple from the tree and selling the apples without harvesting to an intermediary. We see around 15% of farmers chose harvesting the apple and selling it at the farm gate without storing it. And then we see around 30% of the farmers chose the third option, which involves harvesting the apple and taking it to cold storage unit and selling it throughout the year. So when we look at the situation in 2020, we see that again around 50% of the farmers choose the first marketing option, and then around 10% choose the second marketing option, and around 28% chose the third marketing option. And in this case, we see around 8% choose selling the apple at the farmers market. Now, the other situation is we didn't find a majority of farmers selling it to exporters. As I said, just 5% of the apples produced in Turkey are exported. So let's briefly look at the influence of marketing options on cost of production and the price received by the farmers. We see that there is not a, I mean, like these are based on kurush. It's like cents per kilogram. So we see around 38 kurush per kilogram for the first marketing option. We see 45 kurush per kilogram for the second option, and we see 42 kurush per kilogram for the third option. So the costs are not very significantly different from each other based on the marketing option, but the price received by the farmers are changing. So in the third option, the farmers received majorly a significant amount of higher price for the apple that they sell. So the first option gives them the lowest price. And when we look at the case in 2020, we again see the cost of production, and these are average variable costs, are not significantly different between marketing options, but then again we see a higher price for the higher price for the highest price is for the selling it at the farmers market option, and the lowest is again for the first option without harvesting it. So let's look at briefly the profits. Obviously, profits are important. So for 2016, when we didn't have farmers that sell the apples at the farmers market, the highest profits were for selling apple through the cold storage unit. So that give them almost 2.5 times more profit than the first option, and even 3 times more profit than the second option. So when we look at the profits in 2020, we can see again the lowest profits are for the first option, selling the apple to an intermediary without harvesting it, and the highest profits are for selling the apple at the farmers market. But remember, this fourth option has only 8% of the farmers, and the third option had 30% of the farmers. So you see, this selling the apple through a cold storage unit is still having higher profits than the first option, but the relative profitability has dropped. Okay, so in 2016, for example, a farmer who sold apple through a cold storage unit was making almost 2.5 times more profit than the first option. But in 2020, they only make 25% more profits than the first option. So the relative profitability of this cold storage unit option has dropped significantly.
Sorry, Haluk. You have 3 minutes left, please, to finish your
Okay,
presentation. Okay, thank you.
okay.
Sorry for
No,
interrupting.
that's all right.
Okay, thank you.
So problems faced by the farmers during the COVID-19. So based on the marketing options, so we see majority of the farmers complain from lack of labor, and then majority of them complain from lack of buyers. So here the lack of buyers are the intermediaries. So because even if the government said we are allowing people to travel during COVID-19 if they are working in the agriculture and food industry, we still saw significant amount of people, farmers, not being able to find labor and not being able to find sellers to sell their apple. And this is one of the reasons why people at the cold storage units could not sell their apple and why they made relatively less profits than the previous years. And majority of the people preferred selling the apple to an intermediary without harvesting it, because they couldn't find people to harvest their apple. So they behaved as a risk-averse person, and they chose the best option. Obviously, there are consequences for that. So, as I mentioned, selling the apple from a cold storage unit was almost 250% more profitable than selling it without harvesting it option in 2016. However, it is only 22% more profitable in 2020. Hence, with COVID-19, we see much lower relative profitability for selling apple from a cold storage unit option. If this continues, if the situation continues, we might see more farmers quit using the cold storage units, and this could lead to less apple available for wholesalers in big cities throughout the year, and we could see drastic price increases for the consumers in big cities. Although overall production numbers in Turkey for apple is not forecast to decrease, the distribution of wealth has been influenced by COVID-19 pandemic in the supply chain. Based on our preliminary analysis, farmers' well-being has been negatively influenced from the pandemic. Similar results could be expected for other labor-intensive sectors. So we need to support farmers' access to markets, and this could be done through producer organization. And we could also teach farmers how to access to markets through extension services. So Turkey is lacking a significant farmers education system or an extension, formal extension system. So this is important. And Turkey is also lacking cooperatives for apple producers. So we need to, as a country, develop these. And I thank you for your attendance. So that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Haluk, for your presentation. It's really interesting to see your research on the Apple sector. Is there any questions from the audience? Yes, I have here a question from Alisa. How flexible are farmers with switching from one marketing option to another? I can imagine that, for instance, cold storage requires storage capacities, investments, and so on.
I think this is a great question. So we have enough cold storage units available in the region, and the cold storage units are complaining that they don't have enough apples received in their cold storage unit. And the problem is, again, a lack of labor and skilled labor to collect apple at the growing season, because most of the apple trees reach harvest season at the same time in this region, and all the farmers need the skilled labor at the same time. So there might be a difficulty in switching from this not harvesting option to harvesting option? I think that's a good question, and I think that can be a difficulty, and therefore we might need cooperatives who can handle it. Otherwise, the farmers sell the apple with a price that is not even covering their cost of production. So they over time they start to remove their apples and grow cash crops.
Okay, thank you very much, Haluk. So let's move to the next presentation because we are we need to be on time. So I give the floor now to Irene Kumonen. She's going to present the paper on future challenges and resilience of farming system in Europe, transformational change and resilience within the Finnish agri-food system. So thank you very much, Irene, for joining us today, and I give you the floor.
Okay, thank you. Our case concerns the Finnish agri-food system and its transformational change. And I come from the University of Jyväskylä, and we've done this study together with Tuomas Kuhmonen from the University of Turku. And okay, to start with, we started with the question whether the historical regime shifts within the Finnish agri-food system are related to the resilience of the system. And our basic premise is related to understanding of agri-food system as a complex adaptive system. And this means that these systems have multiple equilibrium states. And this means that there are states of path dependency and regime shifts that alternate. And we can depict or illustrate this alternation between path dependency and regime shifts by the concept of adaptive renewable cycle. And the resilience is another concept that we looked into with this study. And we see it as the ability of the system to fulfill its function in this, which is in this case is food provision. So, and this should happen also within the ecological carrying capacity of the system. And previous research has shown that these transformation periods can be critical for the resilience of the system. And thus we are looking at whether these regime shifts have caused problems to the resilience of the system. And we conducted a qualitative thematic analysis based on a review of literature on the Finnish agri-food system and its history. Okay, here's the adaptive cycle. I think it's familiar to most of you, but the basic idea with this is that we have a front loop that consists of the exploitation phase, so it means systemic growth, and the conservation phase, which implies stagnation of the system. And then we have the back loop, which consists of release and reorganization. And that is when the system moves into a new stability domain that is or can be defined by a new set of attractors. And we identified in total 6 regimes. It's a term we use interchangeably with a full cycle here, consisting of all the phases of reorganization, exploitation, conservation, and release. And the first phase was expansion phase. It started in the 14th century. Then we have the progressive regime. It started in the 18th century. The cattle regime started in the late 19th century. The pre-modern regime started in the early 20th century. The modernization regime lasted for the latter half of the 20th century. And then we are currently living in the globalization regime, which started in 1995. And basically during this presentation, I would like to present you these regimes, and they are kind of systemic characteristics and how they affected the transformation and resilience to another regime. So we are going to have a look at the front loop, which depicts how the system evolves towards path dependency, how it is defined by a certain set of attractors, and what is the source of growth for the system within this specific basin of attraction. And then we are going to have a look at how this development track that the system took affects the next transformation, and how the resilience of the system behaves, and what are the sources of vulnerability in the transformation phase. The first phase that we identified, we started in 1334, the expansion phase. It was based on extensive mixed farming on permanent fields in the west and slash and burn agriculture in the east, and also hunting and fishing, and especially in the eastern parts also fur farming. So basically only the best farming areas in the south and west were self-sufficient in terms of agriculture. So all the other areas had to rely on a mixture of hunting and fishing, and also they relied on famine foods regularly, such as pine bark. The potential that allowed the system to grow was basically uncultivated land. So majority of the land that we now call Finland was unpopulated and unfarmed area. And during this phase, the agricultural settlement expanded, and there was also slow population growth. But then when the system progressed towards conservation phase, it became more apparent that there were, first of all, the diets were vulnerable, and then there was increasing tax burden on the peasant population, and also numerous wars. And when these conditions were combined with extreme weather conditions in the late 17th century, it resulted in a catastrophic famine, and this famine killed about 1/3 to 1/4 of the whole Finnish population. And what made the situation even worse was that there were continuing wars. So the release phase of this regime lasted about 20-30 years. When there was finally peace, the system set on a new growth path. We call this the progressive regime. It was based on a similar kind of farming technique, extensive farming and slash and burn agriculture. But the new potential that the system, with the system was able to grow, was knowledge and innovations, new crop varieties and agriculture education and so forth. And this resulted in rapid population growth. But this population growth, coupled with the technology of the time, resulted in scarcity of meadows, which implied lack of nutrients, because the cattle manure was basically what fertilized the crops, and the cattle foraged in meadows and forests, and when there were no more meadows for the cattle, there were not enough fertilization for the fields. And also the same situation prevailed in the east, where the suitable forests for slash and burn farming were becoming exhausted. And also the forests ran out of game and fur animals. So actually the sustainability problems of the 19th century were quite severe. And due to population growth, there was also increasing amount of landless people. And again, we had extreme weather conditions and famine in the late 19th century. This famine killed 8% of the population. The next regime that emerged was called cattle regime, and this regime was quite different from the two previous regimes. So it was based on grass cultivation for cattle feed on permanent fields, and also the trade orientation was basically free. So there were no tariffs on grain imports, for example. The potential that allowed the system to grow was the introduction of new iron tools, especially plough. So it allowed to till heavier soils than before. So basically people were using wooden ploughs in the earlier days. And also the emerging industrialization affected this regime because timber, there was demand for timber both overseas and also in Finland. And as the forests were mainly owned by farmers, they were getting extra income from selling timber, and this allowed them to invest in agriculture, for example, in agricultural technology. And all this resulted in increasing productivity of the agri-food system and the first steps of the system towards its industrialization. But the turmoil of the World War I hit Finland as well. It declared its independence from Russia at that point, and this implied the import strains of import channels being blocked. So a lot of grains was imported from the Russian plains, and when this happened, there were food shortages, especially among landless population, urban workers, and so forth. And this created juxtaposition between the farming population and the landless population, and this escalated in civil war in 1980. And this civil war killed 1% of the population. So after the civil war, the very young independent nation based its food policies on a completely different mindset. So it was now about self-sufficiency, being self-sufficient on the food, and it encouraged small-scale farming, and it also implied ending of the meadow-based cattle husbandry. The new potential was becoming from fossil fuels, synthetic fertilizers, new technology. And this quickly resulted in food surpluses and also industrialization development. But the turmoil, the global turmoil, had not ended. So we ended up in war with Soviet Union, and the war implied a shortage of inputs, imported feeds, fuels, and also labor and power, as the men and horses were in war. And all this resulted in food shortages. But anyway, the rationing policies succeeded, and a full-scale famine was avoided even during the war years. After the war, we have this modernization regime. It is characterized by protectionism. Strong agricultural policies were developed during this regime, and also small-scale farming. And still we had fossil fuels, synthetic fertilizers, but also knowledge, agricultural extension developed rapidly during this period. And as a result, the modern welfare state developed. We also had chronic food surpluses, specialization of both the farms and agricultural regions, and then of course urbanization. But as a result also, we had quite a severe environmental problems, long monocultures, eutrophication of waters, loss of agricultural biodiversity, and also at the end of this period, farm investments freezed because they were at the same time restricting the production to limit the surpluses, but at the same time encouraging production to prompt farmer incomes. So we had contradictory policies, and then in the early 1990s, severe economic recession. And quite surprisingly, this recession also affected the agri-food system, as 100,000 Finns were reporting hunger, and the bread lines made a return after decades of no sign of those. And in 1995, Finland joined the EU. And this initiated the globalization regime that we are living in now. It implied EU-wide trade orientation coupled with environmentalism and reliance on agricultural support system. And the potential of the system is still relying on fossil fuels, synthetic fertilizers, digital technology, and cap funds, especially regarding specific farming technologies or styles such as organic farming. And as a result, we have decreasing levels of environmental pollution, deepening specialization and centralization happening throughout the agri-food chains, and decreasing farmer room of maneuver. And it remains to be seen what is the next source of vulnerability. Is it capping in a dead end, climate change, biodiversity loss, refugees, vulnerable farms, pandemics, economic crisis, or perhaps all these together? So as a conclusion, I'd just like to say that the transformation periods, they have been important because they have given the source of the new growth for the system, but at the same time, they have always implied loss of resilience to a greater or lesser extent. And systemic contradictions are what behind this cyclicity. I think we are approaching the limit of my time, but I thank you at this point for listening. And please, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer these.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Irene. It's been a really interesting presentation. Let me ask the audience if they have any questions for you. Okay, I can't see any questions from the audience, but I would like to ask you, so you've been assessing all the changes during all this time, this period, long time period. It's really interesting to see that you found that transformations hindered the resilience of the system, because we always are hypothesizing that transformation contributes to improve resilience. How can we do? Yeah, what happened? What can we do to turn this transformation into something that improves the resilience of the system?
Well, we cannot kind of plan a perfect system. We will always kind of have these sustainability problems. They just might be different in the next regime. So I think that the point is to be prepared. So even though we have had in the Finnish history occasions of food shortages, sometimes they have led to famine, but not at all times. So, but it requires being quite careful and about the situation. So kind of being prepared for it. I think that that is the key from resilience point of view.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Peter Fein also asked if you are building on food regime theory.
Well, I am. It's part of the framework, but the main theoretical insights are being built on the adaptive renewal cycle. But but it's there as well. Yeah, the food regime theory.
Okay, and another question. This is also from the project, because Alisa Spiegel also comment that maybe it's a question of short versus long term when you assess the transformation and resilience. It seems that in the short term, transformation causes a reduction of resilience.
Yeah, well, obviously it's a matter of time scales, but even though during very short time scales you can have 1/3 to 1/4 of the whole population dying of hunger, so so that's the short term also matters. So
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you very much. So we are run out of time. So thank you, Irene, for your presentation. Really, really interesting looking at this different point of view and this long-term vision. So thank you very much. Really interesting. Let's move to the next and last presentation. Now is the time for Camelia Gabrilescu from Romania. She's going to talk about challenges, strategies, and roadmaps for a resilience-enabling environment in the small mixed farming system in the northeast of the regions of Romania. So, Camelia, sorry for that. Always the last one always have to deal with less time than the others. So sorry. Let's see if we are able to meet the time. So please try to do your presentation in 10, 12 minutes to have just at least 3 minutes to talk and to pose the questions of the audience. So thank you very much. I give you the floor.
Thank you, Barbara. Can you see my screen? My presentation? I shared it. Can you hear me? Okay, let me see the presentation. Which one? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. You can.
Okay.
We can see it and we can hear you perfectly. So you can start when you want. Thank you, Camelia.
Okay, just let me put the slideshow. All right. So hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be here and try to present you a part of our work of the Romanian team working in the Sure Farm project. This presentation is going to show you some partial results from the last workshop that we conducted in the northeast region of Romania, the workshop on participatory development of actions and roadmaps for a resilience and enabling environment. Just a few words about the northeast region. On your left, you can see the map of the Romania, how it's located in Europe, and then on your right, the northeast region. Okay, so just a few features, very diversified landscape, very diversified climate, varying along altitude and landscape from mountain to temperate continental, so a large range of conditions. Mostly hills and low plains are exposed to extreme weather events, more frequently droughts. Very diversified range of agricultural activities. Main features of the farming system. The first thing that I would like to emphasize is the fact that after the end of the communist regime, due to the process of land restitution, the result was an extreme large number of farms. So if in Romania currently I mean, in 2016 was the last farm survey, and this year will be the next agricultural census. In 2016, Romania used to have 3.42 million farms of an average area 3.7 hectares, and the Northeast region 72,000 farms of an average area of 2.7 hectares. So you can now realize why we choose to analyze the small mixed farming system. Okay. We identified during the whole project and the various tasks, we identified the main challenges, and these are the past and let's say current challenges that the system is facing. I will just emphasize a few of them. The problems regarding the drought, extreme weather. In economic terms, there is a threat of losing alternative of farm income sources, which is basically the let's say the base for investment in the small mixed farming system, and this was quite important during the COVID crisis. Another problem is linked to the emigration of young people. Young people do not see too many opportunities for themselves in the current farming system in Romania, so they go abroad to work and make themselves better life, which means that back home we will see a lack of labor, mostly of temporary labor, for the existing farms. Okay, so these were the challenges that we assigned to the proposed archetypes. Not all of them were analyzed, only 4 of them. You will see them right away. Just something to highlight. The archetype of eroding goals was not identified among the challenges in our case study, but we added the growth and underdevelopment archetype linked to the challenge of poor integration of small farms in agri-food chains. So what are we going to do about archetype 1 linked to the challenge of climate change and extreme weather conditions? I'll just pick some ideas. Mostly increase the awareness of insurance importance. Romanian farmers, especially the small, even the medium ones, avoid working with the insurance company due to bad memories and experiences, which led last year it was a year of extreme drought, and despite the fact that there were available funds from the Common Agricultural Policy, farmers, due to old habits or lack of information, did not apply in many numbers for these support measures from the National Rural Development Program. They prefer to wait for the emergency funds system. Okay. Very important, I think, is to fight this kind of archetype, changing the educational programs and promoting good practice models, and educating farmers on the necessity of using this kind of instruments. Archetype 3, limits to growth, we assigned it, we linked it with the challenge change of agricultural policies and regulations, which is something that was emphasized during absolute all the workshops we were into in the region. Farmers and even local civil servants are very unhappy consultants also about the high frequency of change in agricultural policies and regulations. Again, important for fighting this archetype is the education and training for consultants on the one hand, but the absolute need for the national policy makers to increase the stability of regulating frameworks. Okay, we going now to the archetype 4, success to successful. We linked it with the challenge, business development, and need for diversification. The starting point was the fact that, which is common knowledge, of course, that if if the civil servant would need to choose between the proposal for funding from a farmer who never have done this before and another one who has done it successful in the past, definitely the second one will have better chances to win, even if sometimes new and young farmers might have interesting ideas and worth funding. Very important, again, the idea of education and training of consultants and importance of farmers to have full information. And also very important in this respect, knowledge transfer from research to farmers, and also changing the current curricula in both vocational schools and universities in order to meet the current needs of small farmers, and the orientation of research topics to current needs of the agricultural system and of the small farmers in our case. Last archetype analyzed, growth and underdevelopment, which we linked with a very important challenge met by the small mixed farming system for integration of these small farms in agri-food chain. And here the main topic that was debated and quite for a long time, I would like to say that our workshop prolonged by 1.25 hours, 1 hour and 15 minutes more than what's initially scheduled, because people wanted to say and debate all these problems. So supporting cooperation, which is absolutely essential also to improve integration of small farms in agri-food chains, and also for business development. There is a historical reluctance of farmers to cooperation, mostly of farmers who are, let's say, a bit older and used to live in the former regime before 1990. In their mind, cooperation means that old type, Soviet type of cooperation, which has nothing to do with the modern concept of market economic cooperation. So I would like to stress the fact that in supporting cooperation, non-financial resources are absolutely essential, and they go far beyond the needs of financial funding resources. Something to add here in order to improve the integration of small farms, something that developed very much during the COVID crisis. There was promotion of local products, promotion of short chains and establishing local selling platforms by farmers, by NGOs, and with very little funding, but essential in this respect was information and support from consumers. Again, I would like to emphasize the importance of training and education for the farmers and even for their children to start thinking, let's say, of cooperation and working together. Not let's say the current education system is promoting generally the idea of champions, of one single runner. This must be changed, because otherwise cooperation, which is the basis of good integration in agri-food chains, good penetration of markets, supermarkets, working together with processors and so on, would not have any chance.
Thank you very much, Camelia. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you. Really good sentence to finishing your presentation, the need of education of children to not for being an individual runner. We need cooperation. So let's see if any of the audience, I'm happy to see that we are, I think that the last number I have here is that we are more than 70 people connected in the audience. So thank you very much for your collaboration and your interest in our session. Haluk is asking, how can we promote cooperation? Let's answer this question before the end of the presentation.
Well, there are two ways which are currently in force. Let's say it's the top-bottom approach. I mean, promotion of everything linked to cooperation, ideas, principles, norms, regulations, and so on, which is promoted by the Ministry of Agriculture and Food and by the consultancy system. And the better one, it would be the bottom-up approach, which would mean that farmers must acknowledge for themselves that trust, which is the basis of cooperation, is far better, and it would help them to increase their capacity of entering market, of improving technologies, of improving efficiency and profits.
Okay, thank you, Camelia. There is another question from the audience. Peter Feint is asking that. Give you many thanks. Thanks you for your presentation, and also, why do you see experience abroad a challenge and not as a capacity?
Well, not necessarily a challenge, but experiences abroad is really it can be also judged as a challenge when we are thinking about young people that gained this kind of experience out abroad, are coming back, and they are having conflicts with their parents, which are the current owners of the farm. And some of these older farmers are not very open to new ideas and to the new vision of their young children, because the young generation is generally seeing the farm as something for profit, as economic and as a business, while most of the old farmers are seeing the farm just as something which has sentimental value, and also a value which gives them a certain position in the community. So this is this kind of conflict that might be an explanation for that seen as a challenge.
Okay, I think you're really it's really clear your explanation. So also Peter Fenn says that it's really good to see how the farming system level perspective helps to develop resilience enhancing strategies. So it's time to finish our session. Thank you very much, all the presenters. I don't know, Javier, if we are able to show all of us in the session just to say goodbye, if it's possible. No? Okay, so let's finish the session today. You can go to the networking room and see the others in the seminar, chat a little bit, or also see them. And I'll see you in the next session that will start at 10:15. So thank you very much, all of you, and I'll see you later. Thank you. Bye.